Alright, so the new set Mythical Island is now live in Pokemon TCG Pocket, and you might be wondering what's good in this set, how can I improve my decks, what kind of new decks are out there, or what cards can I collect? And hopefully right here this video will answer all those questions for you guys. Hopefully this will give you some ideas to start building some new decks, because I know the game's been getting a little bit stale just because we haven't had any new cards. So I'm excited to see some new cards added to the mix. Even though it is a smaller set, only 68 cards total, I do think there's some very solid cards in the set, and also some really interesting combos that really create new decks in general. So first and foremost, if you watch this video all the way through and you enjoy it, I'd appreciate it if you like it and subscribe to the channel. More Pocket content coming soon, and TCG content in general, just Pokemon stuff in general pretty much. But more importantly, let's go ahead and talk about the set, because like I said, it is an interesting one, especially because we received a trailer. We knew about this set coming out, we knew a couple cards, revealed in the trailer, but for the most part, a lot of these cards were kind of kept under wraps. We didn't really know what was coming in this set, aside from obviously Mew and a few other cards. But going through the set list, there's honestly some really interesting cards, and I really enjoy some of these artworks. I think one of my favorite parts about Pocket, honestly, is the fact that they kind of reuse some of the artwork from the actual trading card game, but also the fact that they reuse a lot of the same moves and abilities. Sometimes they give them to different Pokemon, for example, and you kind of get to see them in Pocket be just as strong as they were in the TCG. So it's honestly like a really cool connection that they do to kind of bridge that gap between both games. But yeah, like I said, this is kind of a shorter set, so not too many cards. There are going to be some pretty impactful ones though. I do see some of these decks kind of popping off, so we'll go ahead and talk about those as well. Before we get into the actual cards and how good they are, I do kind of want to like go over briefly some of the artworks of the rare cards. I know some people like to just collect the cards and look at them, so we'll kind of talk about that first. And then afterwards, I'll go through card by card and kind of explain what I think is going to be good, what I think you can kind of build off of, and kind of explain some decks. And I gotta say, like, looking at some of these cards, man, I'm kind of sad that these aren't like actual cards. Like, look at this Executor card. This is actually sick. This is a really, really cool design, honestly. This is probably one of my favorite ones that I've seen so far in this set. And then honestly, the Superior kind of has that same like artwork style. I guess it's a different artist though. Picture's like a little bit blurry, so I can't exactly read out the name, but I can tell that it's different, so I do see that. This is kind of interesting. A lot of Pokemon cards nowadays, I feel like have this kind of like realistic artwork, so that's kind of interesting to me. Not a huge fan of it. Vaporeon, obviously a lot of people are a big fan of the Pokemon. It's kind of a basic card to me. Dedenne, pretty cool Pokemon. Not bad artwork. I always forget about Marshadow. I forget this Pokemon even exists, to be honest. And then of course we just have our kind of standard EX, full arts here. I'm not a huge fan of these, like, this artwork for these Pokemon. I don't know. I'm really not a fan of them, like, from the first set at all. And I mean, I see that they're coming back, obviously. Nothing too crazy, but it's still kind of cool to, get a full art card in general. Obviously, we have our trainer cards and everything. This is a very, very cool, really all three of these. I didn't even see the Aerodactyl. Okay. These three are sick, but okay, I gotta say the Aerodactyl is probably the best one. Like, I don't know what beats this, to be honest. This is a really cool artwork. The Mew, obviously, very, very cool as well. The Celebi, it's alright, but man, that Aerodactyl is crazy. And we're gonna get into all the abilities, the attacks, but I just wanted to go through some of those artworks first. I gotta say, the Aerodactyl card is probably gonna be my favorite for sure, out of all the special rare cards. And I'm a pretty big fan, honestly, of just the design of the pack too. I think the pack artwork's always important too. I'm somebody that, like, through my years of collecting Pokemon cards, I've always kind of like collected the pack artworks as well. So like every time I open a pack, I'll just like go ahead and keep it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because it just makes me kind of sad, because I've got like Crystal Guardians artwork. I got all kinds of stuff here, man. All kinds of old pack designs. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Mythical Island, which cards are good, which cards are bad. But the first card here is going to be Execute. And right off the bat, we're looking at a pretty bad card in my opinion. So its only attack is Growth Spurt. Take a grass energy from your energy zone, attach it to this Pokemon. I think this is a bad card because even though we do already have Executor EX in the game, we have the other Executor card, not this one, but the previous one. Both of those are, decent cards, but they don't really require a lot of energy. And for this, you have to basically be in the active, you have to use this attack. You only have 50 HP, and it requires an energy to use, so by the time you actually use it, I feel like you're getting knocked out anyways. And again, the Executor card coming out in this set doesn't seem that great. It is 80 damage plus 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Requires 4 energy though, requires kind of a lot. So I don't really see this being a good card, honestly. I don't think it really does anything for the existing Executors, which are like kind of viable. And then this Executory just seems kind of bad overall. If that energy cost was lower, like let's say this was like 2, for example, then yeah, that'd be kind of crazy. But 4 energy, I feel like that just takes too long to set up. Now that being said, our next 2 grass types, this is going to be what I think is going to be a brand new deck. Right away, just kind of looking at the set and kind of reading some of the cards, I was like, okay, like right off the bat, these 2 are going to pair well together. And that, of course, is Celebi EX, one of the big EXs for this set here. And it has Powerful Bloom, which might look a little familiar to some of the cards that we have currently in the format. But flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 50 damage for each heads. So obviously, you know, we love coin flips, depending on what deck you play, which I would say is most decks in this game. But yeah, 50 damage for every heads that you land. And the reason why I say this pairs well with this next Pokemon is because obviously we have Snivy, which is going to evolve into Servine, and that's going to evolve into Superior, which has the Jungle Totem ability, which might look familiar if you played the TCG before, kind of an older ability. But basically, each grass energy attached to your grass type Pokemon provides 2 grass energy. So in other words, for every grass energy attached to your grass type Pokemon, it provides 2 grass energy. So really, you know, if you have 2 grass energies on Celebi, that counts for 4 essentially. So really, you know, this paired up with Superior, obviously it's going to take a little bit to set up. You're going to have to kind of figure out what cards to, you know, put in to make it most consistent. But basically what this is going to do is Superior is going to double your energy essentially for Celebi, which means you're going to be hitting way harder. And now I know it might seem like, hey, you have to set up for a while, you know, it might take some time to do that, but you have to remember we do have cards in the format. We have Erica, for example, where you can heal 50 off a grass type Pokemon. We have the Butterfree as well, which can heal. There's going to be different cards, you know, you got to kind of remember like what we currently have plus this. And in combination, I'm pretty sure that you can make this work pretty well. So I do think that these 2 will be kind of a good pair right off the bat. As far as our other grass type Pokemon with this set, we do have Shiinotic, which, you know, puts you to sleep, nothing too crazy. I feel like we have a lot of sleep cards in the format, which are a little better. We have that Jigglypuff promo, for example, for 1 energy, you can just put them to sleep instantly. So I think something like that might be a little bit better. The fact that you have to evolve, costs 2 energy, yeah, it does 50 damage, but is it really worth it? Probably not. We do also have the Delamise, I've never pronounced that correctly, but it does 20 damage plus 70 more if it has at least 3 extra energies. So in other words, 4 energies for 90 damage, not that great. Next up we have Ponyta, and we also have Rapidash. This is kind of interesting. So 2 energy here, 40 damage, flip a coin, if heads it does 60 more. I could see this being kind of decent. That's 100 damage for 2 energy essentially. I mean, a lot of decks, like I said, rely on coin flips, so I mean, what's 1 more coin flip, right? But that is kind of a lot of damage for just like a 1 prize Pokemon. And keep in mind, we do also currently have Blaine, the supporter card, so when you use that with Rapidash, you'll do 30 more damage. So you're talking potentially 130 damage for 2 energy. That's pretty good. Now, I don't know what deck you would necessarily add this to, or like what you would kind of build it around. It's probably like something kind of built around Blaine, which I'm kind of looking at on the side of my screen here. So that's for Ninetales, Rapidash, and Magmar. I do see we have another Magmar card. This one does 80 damage, discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon, so plus the 30, that's 110 we're talking here. So these are all kind of interesting cards that kind of fit in that Moltres category. You know, we currently have Moltres with like Charizard and things like that, so I do think that some of these cards could be kind of useful in that deck. After that, we do have Larvesta into the Volcarona. This is kind of an interesting one, kind of a high cost here, but it's really nice because you can go for like a bench snipe here. So this could be a card that's good for like closing out games. So you get to pick 1 Pokemon to do 80 damage to. So again, you know, early game, it could be good. You know, if they're trying to set something up on the bench, you could kind of go snipe it out. Or you could use it kind of late game. Let's say you got, you know, 2 points, you need 1 more point to win the game, and they have something weak on their bench, you can go ahead and knock it out like that. So this could be a very good situational card. Again, this is kind of one that I would kind of fit in with Moltres. Got to kind of get it set up a little bit. So it kind of seems like with these cards, the fire deck is looking kind of like the electric one, where you just have like a lot of options, you know what I mean? So I could see something like that where you know, you go double Moltres and you kind of add your fire type Pokemon that you want. You go double Blaine. I could see that kind of working out too. The Salandite, this is interesting, and I definitely want to talk about this a little bit later on with some other Pokemon in this set. This is an interesting attack here. So Venoshock does 10 damage plus 40 more if your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned. Now keep in mind, we do have a card by the name of Wheezing, which has an ability which will poison the opponent, and there's a card called Koga, which will pick up your Wheezing. So really, you could poison your opponent, pick up your Wheezing, throw in the Salandite, that's 50 damage, plus the 10 from poison. So that's actually something that I could see kind of thrown into that possibly. Again, maybe I'm kind of overcooking here, but it seems like Salandite's not a bad card. It seems better than Salazzle. Salazzle seems kind of useless. 30 damage and they're poisoned. I mean, yeah. that's literally like a worse version of Weezing. So I could see Salandite being used in Weezing possibly. I don't think Salazzle is going to be useful at all. And again, this is all just my opinion, but just kind of what I'm thinking as somebody that also plays the TCG here. We got this Magikarp card, which the artwork looks really nice. I really like that. Switch this Pokemon out with one of your bench Pokemon, so, I mean, staying true to the nature of Magikarp, it's basically useless. Now, the Gyarados EX is interesting. 140 damage. Discard a random energy from among the energy attached to all Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. So, I mean, this is kind of like, you know, outrage in the Pokemon games, I guess, where you just don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of interesting. You could possibly discard your own energy or your opponent's. You just don't really know. But I mean, 140 damage is 140 damage. Misty exists. You can get those energies pretty quickly if you get lucky. So overall, I could see that being a decent card. Plus the 180 health is kind of crazy. Vaporeon looks like a card that could also be useful in water decks, being able to move energies around. You know, especially with Misty, how you can only attach it to like one Pokemon, for example. Having this Vaporeon would be kind of nice. But when you kind of think about like, that's kind of what's interesting about Pocket. Like the decks are so small. It's only 20 cards. So it's like you got to include the Eevee, you have to include the Vaporeon, and then you have to hope that you find those cards. So I could see this being used. I just don't really know how yet, but it definitely does seem like it has potential. After that, we have Finneon and Lumineon, which kind of interesting, similar to what we were looking at earlier, where you have the ability to snipe the bench, except now you're only doing 50 damage instead of 80. Could be something useful as well. Again, you do have to have the pre-evolution, the evolution, so it might kind of take up too much space, but kind of an interesting attack there. We got Choodle into Dreadnought. Flip a coin. If heads, discard a random energy from your opponent's active. Doesn't seem worth it. 70 damage, 3 energy, you have to evolve. Kind of takes a lot there. We got Cramorant, one of my favorite Pokemon here. Flip a coin. If heads, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon. Honestly, doesn't seem that great. You need 3 energies again. You know, if they have a Sabrina, they could just go for Sabrina. We got another Pikachu. We constantly get Pikachu. That's not going to change. This attack does 10 damage for each of your bench electric Pokemon, so potentially 30 damage. And to the Raichu, 60 damage. This attack also does 20 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's kind of interesting. Some good spread damage there. So really in total, you're doing 120 damage if you think about it. We've got Electabuzz, does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So we're getting a lot of like bench sniping Pokemon, which is interesting. I think it's actually good for the game because we really don't have a lot of that right now. One thing I can think of right off the bat is like Greninja. But we don't have a lot of things that can kind of hit the bench, and really the only way to switch in right now is with Sabrina. So I think it's nice that there are ways to hit the bench. I think it's a great way to kind of add another layer to the game, if you will. We do have Joltik here, kind of a cool artwork there. We got Mew in the background. You know, pretty weak. Joltik's always like the weakest Pokemon. I feel like it has the lowest HP ever. Evolves into Galvantula. This is a cool card. It does 70 damage for only 2 energy, and it does prevent your opponent from retreating. So this is something that, again, maybe you kind of put this in with Weezing. I don't know. I've been playing a lot of Weezing, so I apologize for all the Weezing talk here, but I'm just kind of thinking with Weezing, you know, you don't really attack with Weezing too much. You kind of use Arbok to lock people in, so I mean, I guess it's kind of the same thing, honestly. Then you'd have to add like a different energy, so maybe not, but this seems like a decent card if you can make it work with something. The Dene, at least it got a cool artwork, but right here the attack is not that great. Has a chance to paralyze, no guarantee though. We've got our basic Mew here. We got Psyreport for 20 damage. Your opponent reveals their hand. Kind of cool, I guess. Seems kind of useless. Mew EX, of course, the staple card of this set here. It does have genome hacking, and if you have played the Pokemon TCG, you already know that Mew EX has this attack as well in that game, where you basically get to choose any attack, and you get to copy that, and there you go. Now, it does only work on your opponent's active Pokemon, so I have seen people like talking about this card, and oh, it's gonna be crazy. And I do think it's gonna be good. You know, it's gonna be situational. I think it's gonna be a card that like, It's probably gonna go good in Gardevoir, I would imagine, and you're not gonna want to use it just for no reason. One of those things where it kind of sits on your bench, you give it one energy, and then when the time is right, you switch it in, attach another energy, use Gardevoir to power it all the way up, and then you can just copy. So it is going to be an interesting card. I don't think it's going to be as good as people think, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. We've got Sigilyph. I kind of forget this Pokemon exists. It's got Spike Jaw. Looks kind of bad. LGM, I know this is based off of an artwork. I'm pretty sure because I'm almost positive I actually have this card. Kind of interesting. Oh, it does have Behem. Okay, they're just out of order here. So it does evolve into Behem. 10 damage. Attack does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So basically, potentially 70 for one energy. That's kind of interesting. I mean, a lot of times people fill their bench too, so could be kind of good. I don't really see it working. The thing about a lot of these cards is like, yeah, the attacks kind of work, but it's like, could you make a deck off of that one Pokemon? Probably not. Like, I can't imagine myself making a Behem deck, you know what I mean? And then it's like, if I don't build the deck around that, what am I going to include? Like 1 and 1 as far as the lines go. So it's kind of hard to find, in game. So some of these cards, like, they have decent attacks, but I don't know if they would really necessarily work. Yeah, some of these Psychic type Pokemon here are a little bit out of order. But we do have like Flabebe, for example. So looks like another guaranteed sleep Pokemon to just make everyone's life more annoying. Evolves into Floette, which does 40 damage for 1 energy and heals 10. Okay. Into Florges, which is 80 damage, heal 20 from each of your Pokemon. That's kind of an interesting card. We've also got one of my favorite fairy type Pokemon, Swirlix, which evolves into Slurpuff. Unfortunately, it looks like it's garbage. 60 damage for 2 energy, nothing crazy there. We've got Mankey, 1 energy, potentially 50 damage or no damage. I mean, if you like to roll the dice, there you go. And your reward for evolving is just guaranteeing the 50 damage, so there's nothing else on top of that. The artwork looks really cool. I like the artwork, but it's kind of a bad card. We've got Geodude, nothing crazy there. Graveler, nothing crazy. Golem, during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 30 less damage, 120 damage. We don't really have a way to like accelerate fighting type energy that I can think of right off the top of my head, so I don't really see this working out. 4 energy will be a lot. It's not like, water where you have Misty. It's not like, where we have Superior now with the grass type deck, or Moltres with the fire type deck. I can't really think of anything that accelerates fighting type. I could just be like blanking out here, but I'm not thinking of anything right now. Next up we have Aerodactyl EX, which has the cool artwork that I showed off at the beginning of the video. Does 80 damage here, decent amount of damage, nothing crazy though. But it does have the ability to where your opponent cannot evolve their active Pokemon with any Pokemon from their hand. So this is kind of interesting. I honestly don't see this being that good, just because I feel like usually you're trying to evolve stuff on your bench and then switch it in. You're usually not trying to have the thing you're trying to set up in your active unless you have to. So I don't see this being that good. We got Marshadow here. It's got Revenge. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out, it will do 60 more damage. Nothing crazy. Right now, fighting isn't really a great deck, I don't think. Honestly, yeah, like you got Stone Journey here. Like, 90 damage, but you need 3 energy. I don't think, yeah, fighting kind of got nothing with this set, honestly. Like, none of these cards seem good. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. I keep talking about Weezing, and fortunately, it seems like Weezing might have gotten a little bit better. Whether you like Weezing or not, I don't know, but I say fortunately because I like to play Weezing. The Coughing seems interesting here. I guess you would just run 2 of these Coughings instead of the other ones. Put 1 random Coughing from your deck onto your bench. I mean, you can only run 2 of every Pokemon, right? So like, wouldn't you just be able to put 1 there? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why it's worded like that, but okay. Now the reason I say this is interesting, and I could be, completely wrong about this, but I do think that this might be kind of interesting for the current like Weezing Arbok deck to maybe run like 1 of the new Weezing and 1 of the old Weezing. You do have the move here, Smokescreen, 50 damage. During your opponent's next turn, if the defending Pokemon tries to use an attack, your opponent has to flip a coin. If tails, the attack doesn't happen. And so I think that's kind of interesting because with the other Weezing, you can obviously poison Pokemon. And then with this Weezing, you're doing 50 damage, which is not a whole lot, but you gotta remember you got that poison damage. And then every turn they're flipping coins to just attack, and they might not even be able to attack at all. So I do think that this could be kind of an interesting mix into the current Weezing deck to kind of have 1 and 1. It seems like it would make it a lot more annoying. It seems like, you know, your goal anyways is to just kind of live and stall out, and you're not really doing a whole lot of damage anyways. So I do think having the ability to just shut off attacks in general on top of the poison, and then you got Arbok too where you can lock people in, I think that's going to be very annoying to deal with. After that we have Purloin and we have Liepard, both really bad cards. Venipede into Whirlipede into Scolipede, which does 70 damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned. This does 50 more damage, so 120 total. Pretty good damage overall, pretty good health overall. It's not an EX, so if it dies, it's only the 1 point. But it is a Stage 2, so it takes a little bit to set up here, so maybe some potential there. I don't see it being that great though. Dreadigan, this is an interesting card. I think the energy cost is just too demanding for this to be good, needing the fire and the water. I just don't think that there's a deck where this really works right now. We've got a new Pidgey, new Pidgeotto, and a new Pidgeot EX. Kind of an interesting attack here, 80 damage to the active and 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so a potential for 140. I think that actually might be really good, especially because you do have the colorless energy here, so this kind of works in any deck that you want it to. So this is probably going to be one of the better EXs from the set, I would imagine. We've got the Tauros as well, Fighting Tackle, 40 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an EX, it does 80 more damage. Kind of a similar situation here. I mean, a lot of people are going to run EXs, so this can be kind of a good counter. However, you do need the 3 energy here. Maybe, you know what I mean? I just don't think you have a way to get those energies fast enough. So I don't really know if this would be great. We got Eevee here, and again, if you like coin flips, here you go. It does 20 damage until you get tails. So, I mean, hey, if you get lucky with Misty, just go ahead and throw an Eevee in there as well. Just keep flipping heads. After that, we do have Chatot here with Mimic. Shuffle your hand into your deck to draw a card for each card in your opponent's hand. Not really worth the bench space in my opinion, so probably not very good. We have another old Amber here. I think this is the exact same one that we currently have. I don't see any difference there. We got the Mythical Slab. I actually pulled this earlier. Look at the top card of your deck. If that card is a Psychic Pokemon, put it in your hand. If not, put it at the bottom of your deck. Seems kind of useless. We've got Pokemon Flute, which I don't think is going to be that great. Really, the item cards we got are not that great. Put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. It's very situational. This kind of reminds me of like a red card, for example, where it's situational. Like, yeah, there are times where it is useful, but like, is it always going to be useful? Probably not. So I could see this being good in some decks, but I don't think it's going to be that great overall. I think it's kind of a waste of a slot. There's just kind of better items in the game right now, I think. But again, it kind of depends, you know, and it depends on matchups too, you know? Like if you're playing against somebody that plays big EX Pokemon, like this is kind of useless, I feel like. Whereas if they're playing a lot of weaker basic Pokemon and you bring those back and you have a Pokemon that can snipe the bench, then it's actually going to be very useful. So I think that's kind of what they're going for here. This kind of, I guess, pairs well with a lot of those Pokemon that kind of snipe the bench. Very situational, this card. I don't think it's gonna be that good though. Next we have our supporters, starting with blue. During your opponent's next turn, all of your Pokemon take 10 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. Now this is a card that I think is actually going to be decent. We gotta kind of figure it out and see what decks are gonna be good, but there are a lot of situations, right, where, you know, the game is kind of small right now. There's not a lot of cards in the game. So you kind of get these certain numbers, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I need to hit for this much, right? But I only do this much. And so, like, you know, you're always at risk of a Giovanni, for example, like that 10 extra damage, right? So I think a blue could actually come in clutch with kind of saving you in situations. This will be one of those cards, I think, where if you have the deck space, go ahead and add it in for sure. But I don't think it's going to be in every single deck. I do think it's going to be pretty good, though. I mean, it's basically just like reverse Giovanni. So, you know, Giovanni, sometimes that 10 extra damage will make all the difference in the world. And so with blue, it's the exact same thing, but just the opposite. We've got the Budding Expeditioner. Put your Mew EX in the active spot into your hand. Doesn't seem that good. Mew EX doesn't have a lot of health. You're trying to swing with it right away. If it goes in your hand, that means you lose all the energies. This actually sounds horrible. And then we also have Leaf. During this turn, the retreat cost of your active Pokemon is 2 less. Seems kind of useless. We have X-Speed. I don't know if I'd waste a supporter on that, so probably a pretty bad card, I would imagine. And I guess that was actually it, because the rest here are all the cards that I was showing off earlier with all the different artworks and everything. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the whole set. So kind of an interesting set overall. Some big takeaways here, I would say, starting off with the grass section. Like I said, I do think Celebi EX is going to pair very nicely with Superior. I think it's going to be very good for the grass type decks in general. So those are going to be very good cards overall. And then when it comes with the fire decks, we kind of get a better Rapidash in my opinion. We get a decent Magmar as well. So maybe some interesting stuff there with Blaine, kind of mixing that up with Moltres. I can see that working pretty decently. We also have the Salandite, which again, I think this could go well with the Weezing deck. It kind of just makes sense. 1 energy cost, it's colorless, you're doing 50 damage. Just a good way to kind of get some extra damage off. Sometimes it might actually help you out. For the water types, we do have the Gyarados EX, which has a lot of health, does a lot of damage, discards random energy, could be a decent card. I think just in general with water types, you always have that Misty factor, so I don't think energy cost is something to be afraid of because you do have ways to kind of accelerate that. So I do see this being a decent card. And again, Vaporeon, I'm sure it's going to fit in a lot of those decks as well. The ability is really, really good, especially when you consider Misty. So I do see that being added to some decks. For electric types, we really didn't get too much. We have the Galvantula here, which might be decent. It's kind of similar to Arbok, but nothing too crazy with that type. For the psychic types, we do have Mew EX, which has genome hacking, which will be a very good attack, I do think. I just don't think that this card is going to be as good as some people think it is. It's going to be situational. Again, it does have the 3 colorless energy, so if there's a way to kind of accelerate energy faster, first thing that comes to mind is Gardevoir, but maybe there's other ways too on top of that. So, maybe if you can make that work, then this is going to be a better card. That's kind of it as far as the good psychic types go, I think, from this set. Fighting type, I already said it earlier, I don't think there's any good cards out of the fighting type Pokemon in this set. They all seem pretty bad. And then with the dark types, we do have the new Weezing, which I think will go very well with the other Weezing deck. I think running a 1/1 of those Weezings, running double coughing of this coughing, I think that's actually going to work out pretty well. I'm going to be testing that later on for sure, so I'll see if I'm wrong. We got 1 dragon type, which is Dredigan, which looks horrible because of the energy cost. And then for the colorless Pokemon, we do have Pidgeot EX, which I do think is going to be pretty decent overall. It's going to do a lot of damage, 80 plus 20 for each of your bench Pokemon, your opponent's bench Pokemon. So overall, 140 most of the time. That's a pretty decent amount, especially because you have 170 health. And then, like I said, the item cards I don't think are all that great out of the 3 of them. Obviously, Pokemon Flute's going to be the best out of the 3. I don't think it's going to be that great, but it might be situational. And then when it comes to supporters, the only one I think is going to be decent is going to be Blue, which will be very helpful, I think, in situations. Like I said, this is kind of a reverse Giovanni situation here, so this is kind of a way to actually counter Giovanni if you think about it. But yeah, that's basically an overview of the new set that just released in Pokemon Pocket. Let me know in the comments below if you kind of agree with my thoughts or if you have any questions about any of these cards. These are kind of just first impressions that I have of the cards based off of what we've had so far in the game. I could obviously be wrong about some of these cards. I'm no expert of the game, but I do think just kind of first glance that the cards I pointed out do seem to be like the better cards of the set. And again, it's nice to get this little mini set because I do think in January we are going to get a bigger set if I remember correctly. So it is kind of nice that we get something new here. We got enough here to make the game feel fresh. We got enough here to make some new decks and to change up some current decks. So I'm really excited about that, and I will be testing that out later today. Actually, I'll be streaming later today. So again, if you guys enjoyed the video and you want more Pokemon content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. I'll be trying out some different decks, and I'll probably upload some videos as well, testing those out. So if there's anything you want me to try out specifically, let me know in the comments. But other than that, I got nothing else for you guys. Hope you guys get some great pulls in your packs, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.